There is a weight you carry that shows up on no scale. You feel it in the quiet, after the thing you wanted finally arrives, and the relief does not last as long as you were sure it would. You have tried to set this weight down the only way anyone ever taught you, by adding something. A little more success, a little more certainty, a little more of whatever still feels missing. And still the heaviness comes back, and you cannot quite name it. 700 years ago, a mystic stood in front of ordinary people and told them their heaviness came from the one thing they refused to question. He once prayed, out loud, in front of a congregation, to be rid of God. The church would put him on trial for words like that. This is not a sermon, and it is not a history lecture. You do not have to believe anything to feel what this man saw. Stay with me, because the reason you grow heavier the more you carry is not the reason you would guess. And the preacher they tried to silence spent his whole life trying to hand you the way out. His name was Meister Eckhart. He lived in the German lands more than 700 years ago, a preacher and a teacher in a plain dark robe, and he did something unusual for a man of his learning. He spoke about the deepest things, not in the guarded language of scholars, but in the ordinary speech of the people in front of him. Laborers, nuns, men and women who could not read. He told them that the highest truth was not locked away in a distant heaven or a scholar's library, but resting nearer to them than they were to themselves. That kind of talk drew crowds, and crowds drew suspicion. Near the end of his life, Eckhart was summoned to answer for what he had said. His sentences were gathered and examined one by one, and soon after he died, the church formally condemned a list of them. Sit with how strange that is. A man could be marked as dangerous not for anything he had done, but for a handful of sentences about the inner life. Words about the soul, treated as a threat that had to be contained. Remember that prayer of his, to be rid of God. He was not mocking anything. He meant that even our ideas about God can become one more thing we clutch, one more possession the mind sets on a shelf and calls its own. He wanted to be free even of that, so that what is real could arrive without our handling it first. This is how far he was willing to go. Nothing was allowed to stay in the way, not even the comfortable picture we keep of the sacred. Picture the room he spoke into. Not scholars nodding along in Latin, but bakers and widows and servants who had been told their whole lives that holiness was a ladder, and that other men held it and handed down its rungs. And here was a respected teacher, saying the summit was already inside them, that no one could sell them what they had never lacked. You can understand why that emptied the ladder of its power. And you can understand why the keepers of the ladder pushed back. So what made his words dangerous? Eckhart was quietly taking something apart. He was telling ordinary people that the very thing they had been taught to earn, to wait for, to buy with a lifetime of devotion, was already present in the depth of them, given and waiting. And if that were true, then a great deal of what stood between them and it was not sacred at all. It was simply in the way. The men who judged him understood the danger of that idea better than we do. So let us do the thing they were afraid of. Let us take him at his word and follow it all the way down. Come back to your own life for a moment. When that nameless heaviness rises in you, what do you reach for? Look closely, because the answer is almost always the same shape. You reach to add. When you feel unseen, you reach for achievement. When you feel uncertain, you reach for more information, more control, one more plan that will finally make it safe. When you feel empty, you reach for something to buy, to own, to consume, to accomplish. And when the emptiness follows you into your faith, the reflex comes too. More practices, more books, more methods for becoming the person you have decided you are supposed to be. And here's the part that keeps the whole machine running. It works, for a little while. The new success, the new certainty, the new possession, each one presses down on the ache and quiets it for a day or a week. And then, without asking your permission, the floor opens again, and the ache returns to exactly where it was, only now it asks for more than it did before. An old line in the book of Ecclesiastes says it without flinching. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. You have been living inside that verse for years without ever needing to read it. Notice what is happening here, because it is the whole riddle of this video in miniature. The more you carry, the heavier you feel, when you are promised the exact opposite. Every addition was supposed to lighten you. Each one seems to press down on you instead. Why should that be? Look at the strangeness of it honestly. You may own more than almost any generation that has ever lived. More comfort, more knowledge at your fingertips, more ways to be seen and to fill an empty hour. And you are not one measure less restless for any of it. If adding were the answer, you would already be at peace. The evidence of your own life is saying something you have been slow to hear, and it is not only things that you add. You add opinions to feel certain, and grievances to feel righteous, and a constant comparison against everyone around you, just to locate where you stand. You add versions of yourself, one for each room you walk into, and then you carry all of them at once. Every addition promises to finally settle the question of whether you are enough. Not one of them has ever answered it, because that question was never going to be answered by more. So you add again, and under all the adding, a suspicion begins to form. One you usually push away because you wouldn't know what to do with it if you let it stay. What if the thing you keep pouring in is not the cure, because the emptiness you are trying to fill is not shaped like anything that can be poured? What if you have been trying to end a thirst by drinking the very thing that causes it? Eckhart believed exactly that, and he pointed beneath the thirst to something almost no one is willing to turn around and look at. Eckhart taught that there is a place in you deeper than your thoughts and deeper than your wanting. He gave it several names: the ground of the soul, the innermost, a quiet point that all of your noise never reaches. And he made a claim about that place that caused him all of his trouble. He said that in the ground of the soul, God is already present, not arriving when you finally behave, not summoned by the strength of your effort. Already there, nearer to you than your own breathing, closer than the thoughts you are thinking in this very moment. He went further than was safe to go. He dared to say that there is something in the depth of the soul, so deep and so pure that it is akin to the divine itself, a spark that the traffic of ordinary life never touches. You do not have to accept every word of that to feel where he is pointing. He is saying the light you are looking for is not only real, it is interior. It is the one place you almost never think to search, because you are always searching outward. Stay with what that would mean, because it changes the entire search. If Eckhart is right, then the thing you have chased your whole life by adding was never waiting at the end of the chase. It was underneath it. Imagine running through every room of a house, looking for a lamp, growing more frantic in each empty room, while the lamp burns steadily in the one cellar you never go down into. This is why he could speak of subtraction, where every voice around you speaks of gain. You do not build a fire that is already lit. You clear away what has been smothering it. If something in you is beginning to lean toward this, you can stay close to it. Quietly subscribe, and let the next of these teachings find its way back to you. No fanfare, no interruption. Then come with me, because we have only named the ground. We have not yet faced the one thing that keeps it covered, and it is covered. This is the honest part of Eckhart that the comfortable teachers leave out. He never said the ground was easy to reach. He said it was near, and near is not the same as easy. What is closest to us is often exactly what we are most blind to, because we have never once thought to look there. So what stands between a person and the ground already resting inside them? His answer is not what you would expect, and it is the reason his teaching still cuts to this day. Here is where Eckhart turns from comfort to challenge. He said the thing that covers the ground, the thing standing between you and the peace already in you, is not the world. It is not your body, your work, or your ordinary daily life. It is a certain kind of self. The grasping self. The part of you that owns, compares, defends, and insists. The one who will not let go. Once you see this self in yourself, you begin to notice it everywhere. It is the voice that keeps score. It needs to be right, it needs to be seen, it needs to be a little more than the person standing beside it. It clings to its wounds, because after long enough, the wounds feel like its story, and it does not know who it would be without them. It clings just as tightly to its virtues, because they feel like the proof of its worth. And it reaches for God the same way it reaches for everything else, as one more possession, one more achievement to set on top of the pile. Eckhart saw this without blinking. He said that even our devotion can quietly become a way of serving ourselves, while we are certain we are serving heaven. See how subtle it is. The moment you hear about letting go, this same self will try to seize even that. It will make letting go into a new project, a new thing to be good at, a new possession to hold up as proof that now you are becoming spiritual. It will grip the idea of the open hand with a closed fist. That is how deep the habit runs. The one who wants to be free is often the very one who will not stop holding. You have felt this grip at its most naked, in an argument you could not let go of. Some part of you knew, even while it happened, that being right would cost you the peace of the whole evening, and it chose to be right anyway. That is the self, choosing its own defense over your own rest. It does the same with an old grievance you keep polishing, with a slight you rehearse alone in the dark. Every single time, it is holding something it believes it cannot survive without. And every single time, it only tightens its grip. And now the weight begins to make sense at last. Every time you added something to quiet the ache, ask yourself who was doing the adding. This self. Every accomplishment, every possession, every hardened certainty was one more thing it picked up, and now has to hold and guard and fear the loss of. You believed you were building a life that would finally feel like enough. What you were actually doing was loading a figure that can never be satisfied, because its whole nature is to grip. Everything it has ever picked up, it is still holding. This is the source we have been walking toward since the first heaviness you could not name, which leaves only one question worth asking. What would happen if it finally opened its hand? Eckhart had a word for opening that hand. In his own tongue, it is a word we usually translate as detachment, though he did not mean by it what we tend to mean. He was not telling you to stop caring. He was not asking you to feel nothing, to go cold, to walk away from the people and the work of your life. That is not detachment at all. That is only the grip turned around, a fist clenched now against the world instead of around it. What he pointed to was closer to an inner release, a letting be. He sometimes described it as a kind of standing still, becoming quiet and unpossessive underneath all of your doing. You can still love, you can still labor and build and grieve and give yourself fully to your life. But you learn to hold it the way an open hand holds water, instead of the way a fist holds a coin. The fist is certain that if it loosens, it will lose everything it has. The open hand slowly discovers that what is real does not need to be squeezed in order to stay. And do not mistake this for going numb, or for the tired shrug of someone who has simply stopped hoping. That is not release. That is only despair holding still. The detachment Eckhart means is more awake than your grasping, not less. It is giving yourself fully to the work in front of you, and then not clutching the outcome as though your whole worth hung on it. It is caring completely and clinging to nothing. The person who lives even a little of this does not grow colder. They grow strangely lighter and far more present than the ones still straining to hold everything at once. Think of the people you love most. The grasping self holds them the way it holds everything, tight, with the fear of losing them, and that grip is not the same thing as love. It is anxiety wearing love's face. Eckhart is not asking you to love them less. He is showing you that you can hold them without the clench, present instead of clinging, and that this open way of holding is nearer to real love than the fear ever was. Detachment does not empty your life of what matters. It sounds almost simple, said in a single sentence. It is the work of a lifetime to actually live, because the grasping self does not want to loosen even a little. Its grip feels like survival itself. To this self, letting go feels exactly like dying. And that fear is precisely what keeps almost everyone from ever testing whether Eckhart was telling the truth. We would rather carry a weight we already know than open the hand and risk the fall we imagine is waiting. Everything in this teaching has been walking toward that fall, and toward the reason you have felt heavier with every single year you spent trying to add your way out. So the real question is the one hidden underneath the fear. If you finally release the self that holds, what would actually happen? Would you lose everything, the way it warns you every day? Or would you finally find the thing the holding has been hiding from you? Here is what Eckhart said happens, and it is the still center of everything he taught. He said that God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. When the grasping self finally loosens its hold, even for a single moment, you do not fall into nothing. You fall into the ground. The very thing you were terrified of losing yourself into turns out to be the thing that has been holding you the entire time. Understand what that does to the weight. You always believed the heaviness was the weight of your life, your duties, your failures. the sheer quantity of what you had to carry from one day into the next. It was never any of that. The heaviness was the grip itself. It was the constant effort of a self clenched around everything it owned, too frightened to open, mistaking its own tension for the burden of the world. When a hand opens, the weight is not carried more gracefully. It simply is not there anymore, because it was never cargo. And this is why the peace you kept chasing could never once be caught. Peace was never a thing to acquire and add to the pile. It is what remains when the adding stops. It is the ground showing through, the moment the clenched self steps out of its own light. Eckhart's whole scandalous message, the one they gathered his sentences to condemn, comes down to this. You do not have to become someone else in order to be at peace. You have to release the someone you have been straining so hard to be. So the next time that old heaviness rises, and your hand begins to reach, almost on its own, for one more thing to add, you will not need a technique. You only need to notice the reach, to catch, for one honest breath, the grip you have spent your life mistaking for yourself. You do not have to force the fingers open. Often simply seeing the grip is enough for it to soften on its own. You are not adding one more practice to the pile, and in that small loosening you may feel something you were sure all along that you had to earn, something underneath the noise, something that was never far, never withheld, never waiting for you to finally be enough. Only covered, only nearer than you thought to look, quietly, patiently, already holding you. But notice one thing before you go. A moment ago, when that old heaviness reached for one more thing to add, it reached almost on its own, without asking you first, as if some part of you were acting while the rest of you was somewhere else, asleep. Eckhart and the mystics who came before him and after him kept circling back to that very word, sleep. They insisted that most people pass through their entire lives in a kind of waking sleep, doing, wanting, reaching, defending, while no one is truly home behind the eyes. Not the sleep of night, a sleep you can walk around inside of, a sleep you can work and speak and even pray inside of, and never once suspect that you are in it. It is the reason the grip can run your life without ever asking for your consent. It is the reason you can hear a teaching like this one, feel it land, and still lose it by tomorrow afternoon. So what wakes a person who does not know that they are asleep? What does it feel like in the moment the sleeper first stirs?